What's up, everybody? Welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers. I am Rockin Robbie Billups, and it's the Halloween season, the most wonderful time of the year. So here today on the Rex and Robbie Show, we're going to be talking about our favorite vampire films. We're going to get down to the bottom. We're going to sink our teeth into this topic. So let's bring him in. It's Rex. What is up, my man?
What's going on, brother? Happy Friday. Yay.
Happy Friday. Station, man. Station.
So Robbie and I may not be friends next week as our respective football teams are facing off this Sunday in prime time.
Yep.
So expect that whomever loses will be eating some crow next week, I'm sure.
Hey, I'm not talking any kind of smack. You know, I feel like, first of all, I think we're like a 7-point underdog, right? I don't know. I think the latest I've heard is that Dak is not going to play, which I think is the best. Well. I think it's best not to have him. Yeah, don't bring him back at prime time on Sunday night in Philly. Like that could be.
Yeah, well, you and I talked about this too. I mean, you know, if Cooper was losing all these games, all right, then I could see the need to rush Dak back. But you know, he's winning, so why would you set Dak up to who knows what's going on? So Raul in the house, Steven, what's going on? Chamorro, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, Chamorro was just recently at the Spam Museum and actually shared some photos in the PCP Army, our Facebook group, and man, it looks awesome, Rex. We gotta go.
Oh man, that's it. Road trip, buddy. Are you kidding me? Were there free samples tomorrow? That's what I want to know.
It looked like, and I saw some menu stuff. Steven, real quick, I've only seen the first episode of season 2 of Chucky so far. I got to catch up on the second one, but so far I'm still digging it, but I was kind of let down by that first episode, but I still did like it. So when expectations are high, you know, that's what happens. That's what happens. Tough. All right, so let's get into this, man. Vampire movies. Last week we talked about werewolf films, Rex, and you mentioned that you didn't really watch a lot of werewolf films. You didn't seek out werewolf films. You just happened to have watched some, but vampire movies were more your thing.
And you were going to do vampires, but I think you said you switched to werewolves because of Werewolf by Night. Was premiering that last Friday, so that made sense. But I have to say that my tomorrow there were samples, my friend. So many samples. Oh my God! I'm gonna immediately after the show. I'm gonna go back to my desk and look up the Spam Museum on the internet. Now I can't get it out of my head. Doing the research this morning after receiving your email, I discovered that I reaffirmed that my original statement was true. There's just so many more vampire films to choose from. Yeah, and again, my theory is because there are just so many different ways you can tell the story and so many different genres that you can kind of come in on. And my list kind of proves that. Obviously, you got the obvious ones that we all know have to go on the list. What can you do? But yeah, so yeah, that was fun. Found out some stuff I didn't know. That's a really good thing about these shows is whenever you throw a topic out there, I got to do a little bit of research, and I always find out something I didn't know before. So it's very educational. So yeah, this is an educational program, just like Sesame Street.
It sure is. We need some of that public funding, I guess. I don't know, but yeah, vampire movies fascinate me, and they always have ever since I first watched Dracula and other movies that you will see on my list that I adored when I was a kid. But there's something appealing about staying young forever, being powerful, being a night creature. Like there's some kind of, but at the same time, there's a dark side of it, right? And a lot of these movies explore themes like addiction, lust, immortality, mortality, love. Like there's obsession. There's so many themes that get packed into vampire stuff. And like you said, it goes across genres. We got vampire westerns. We got vampire comedies. We got vampire dramas. We got, of course, vampire freak out, gross out type films. And we also got cheesy, good, golden fun. So I'm curious to know, what's the first one you want to highlight today, Rex? And you out there in the chat, we want to hear what you think. What are your favorite vampire movies?
All right, I got to go with the granddaddy of them all, and obviously that's Nosferatu. And my mom, part of it may be because my mom, growing up, she was a huge vampire fan, right? So she loved vampire movies, Vincent Price, whatever is out there. And Dark Shadows, we were forced to watch every week. Nosferatu, she really enjoyed, and it was on TV one day, right? And I'm like, dude, you know, it's a silent film, and I don't watch silent films, right? You know, I was growing up during that time when even black and white was becoming somewhat unacceptable. So I'm like, you know, it's grainy and everything else, and I'm thinking, well, why are we watching this, right? You know, but my mom wanted to watch it, and I grew up in the days when you had one TV in the house, and I'll always remember that film because it's a silent film. It's kind of choppy, okay, but it scared me, you know, and that to me was just that the kind of, you know, years later when I thought about it, that's the magic to that film was, you know, you had no dialogue, nothing, just the soundtrack, whatever, silent film, and it was freaky. You know, the movie actually made me afraid, you know, with its poor quality, you know, for the time, obviously, you know, this being the 70s, and the movie was made, I think, what, I wrote it down somewhere, 1922.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, right. And there was no you know, kind of touching it up or cleaning it up type thing, technology that really existed yet, right? Remastered, as we call it now. So to me, that was what was the magical part about that movie, was that even though I didn't like silent films, you know, couldn't stand it, didn't like black and white, this movie reached out and scared me. So it shows you the art there. And then this is a little piece of trivia that I learned while doing the research. So Nosferatu was completely based on Bram Stoker's Dracula, okay? But he didn't have the rights to it.
Yeah.
Because Bram Stoker's widow complained that they were getting ripped off. So he had to change the name. So it went from Count Dracula to Count Nosferatu, you know, all kinds of things like that. So that I did not know. So I thought that was interesting. But, you know, Bram Stoker's widow, I don't know if she really accomplished her goal, because certainly from Nosferatu, all of these other, you know, vampire movies were made. And for the longest time, they were more or less based on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely love Nosferatu. And yeah, they like exactly like you said, they wanted to do Dracula. They couldn't get the rights. They didn't care. They just did it anyway. They renamed him Count Orlok. Max Schreck, who plays Count Orlok, is freaking so creepy in that movie. And the atmosphere, it's on my list too, because there's something to me that's even more inherently creepy about really well put together silent horror films, because there's no like direct audio, like we're not hearing the voices of the performers. Like there's this distance, right? Where it's like, I don't know, there's this void between it where there's something about it so ethereal and creepy, that German expressionism. One that's on my list that's very similar is a movie called Vampire. And it's a very expressionistic vampire film at the time. And they would do these things where they would do those, you know, where you would have two images over each other. So things looked very ghostly. And because of the old quality of film and stuff, it goes right along with Nosferatu for me as some of the creepiest visuals in a vampire movie. But I want to kick off officially with my favorite vampire film, which is just because to me, if you say Nosferatu is the granddaddy of them all, this is the daddy of them all. It's Dracula. 1931 Dracula, directed by Todd Browning, starring so many people, including the awesome Bela Lugosi, but you also got David Manners, you got Edward Van Sloan. This is such a great movie. Todd Browning had just come from silent pictures, right? He's the guy that did London After Midnight. He's the guy that eventually did Freaks, right? Which is another really great movie, not vampire movie, but a cool movie. So Todd Browning in this day and age, they were still working out like, okay, how do we use sound in a movie? So there's a lot of silence in Dracula. There's no score throughout the movie, right? It's been scored since by like Philip Glass, and it's cool and all, but the silence, the visuals, the camera movements, as sparse as they are, but at the time kind of groundbreaking. Such a great movie, and that amazing, everlasting performance by Bela Lugosi that now everybody who has ever done Dracula gets compared to him.
Well, I have to say that for the traditional vampire look going forward until, you know, recent ages, Bela Lugosi defined that. Okay. You know, I mean, you didn't, you know, Nosferatu was unique in the sense that I like really what they did with Shrek in the sense that he had the vampire ears and kind of the rat features, you know, the bald head and that type of thing. I think
you see again in Salem's Lot, right? When they bring that back, and that's so creepy, man.
Exactly. But it didn't go that direction. I think that the most vampire movies, whether it be Vincent Price or or even Peter Cushing, whoever ended up playing it, their vampire was based off of the Bela Lugosi look. The slick back hair and the tuxedo, dark suit and all that stuff. So that was very defining. So I agree with you. It didn't make my list, mainly because I figured it was probably going to make your list. And for me, sure, Nosferatu was impactful mainly because it was a silent film. But yeah, my mom obviously loved Bela Lugosi too, watching all those movies as well.
Heck yeah. Look at us going through the early decades, the 20s and the 30s. What else you got, Rex?
All right. So let's see. Should we do something obvious? We'll do something obvious. Okay. Obviously Bram Stoker's Dracula. Okay. Not one of Keanu Reeves. I don't feel like his strongest roles. All right. And I'm a big Keanu Reeves fan. I mean, believe you me, from Bill and Ted, to The Matrix, to John Wick. I mean, I'm a big fan. Speed.
Whoa, dude, Dracula's like in love with Mina.
Yeah, exactly. He was not the person they should have cast in that role. He tends to play the same guy with a twist, but it just didn't fit. There was no accent. It just all was so awkward. It wasn't a role for him, I don't really think. So that kind of ruined it for me in that sense. But other than that, overall, I thought, the film was phenomenal. It was majestic. It told the right story. Gary Oldman with the number of costume changes he had, aging back and forth. But I mean, Gary Oldman, I mean, he took that movie. I mean, just, hands up, straight down. That movie was him, and his acting chops seriously came out. And you look at Oldman and you see the numerous roles he's played. Okay, from Commissioner Gordon, to Dracula, to just so that was really, and it was well shot. I mean, from every scene.
Yeah, Francis Ford Coppola knows what he's doing there. It's a beautiful film. It's rather faithful to the novel compared to other adaptations of its time.
Yes.
Though they do add in that love connection that Mina's the reincarnated soul of Dracula's old wife and whatever. But one thing that really stands out about Gary Oldman in that film is that he's able to play the suave, romantic Dracula as well as the nasty, gnarly, creepy, scary Dracula.
Right. Yeah. With the big do up top. So that just shows a range of Gary Oldman. So as beautiful as the film cinematically was, Oldman really took the reins there and really made that film, in my opinion. But
absolutely. Plus you had Tom Waits as Renfield, and that's never a bad decision right there. I'm going to tell you, I liked him. All right. My next one's going to be an obvious one. And everybody will know what I'm saying when I go, cry, little sister. Lost Boys. I adore The Lost Boys. We covered it a couple years ago for Horror Fest, and we all had so much fun revisiting that movie. I watched it as a kid, so having kids being kind of the central focus in this vampire story really appealed to me. I felt like I was one of the Frog Brothers, or that I was Sam, Corey Haim's character, and I needed to go out there and fight vampires and stuff like that. I thought the vampires were super cool. It was a rock and roll MTV type picture, but it works. The editing, Joel Schumacher gets a lot of crap talked on him sometimes because of his Batman films, but The Lost Boys is phenomenal. Kiefer Sutherland, oh my goodness, he is so good as David in this movie. Everybody is good. I am mesmerized by the film. I think it's a beautifully sexy film that has an amazing soundtrack going all the way through, great vampire effects, and honestly, they are the first vampires to sparkle, because when they get staked, it's hard to tell because of the way that it didn't really show up with the lighting of the film, but they spew out glitter, but this is awesome. Like what Twilight was, I guess, to teens at that time, Lost Boys was to me when I was a kid, and I think that's just way better. So I don't know. I'm going Lost Boys, man.
I couldn't stomach the Twilight films at all. I think I watched the first half an hour of the first one and shut it off. But Lost Boys is also on my list. And I think that the magic, and this is the magic of the whole genre that we talked about, right? You can put vampires in almost any environment and you can make that work, right? Because they're a society, a culture that lies beneath our awareness. And I think Lost Boys, to me, the timing was right. The casting was excellent. And it was kind of like a John Hughes film meeting vampires. It was, the movie starts, same type of situation, older brother, younger brother moving to a new town and, having to assimilate and get along, right? And then you have the two Corys in the movie, all right, and Corey Feldman acting like the wacko job, conspiracy theorist with his tinfoil hat. Okay, weird kid. They run into each other in a comic book. Corey Haim trying to be on that level of, I'm trying to be the new cool kid, and then I got these geeks talking to me about werewolves and vampires and stuff, and it was just a really well done film, and something that involved vampires that we had not seen before. It's like, whoa, bunch of teenagers, and then the twist at the end, the whole friggin' town is full of vampires, and the mom's boyfriend turns out to be the head vampire. I mean, that was awesome.
That great ending when the grandpa's like, one thing I can never stand about Santa Carla, all the goddamn vampires.
Yeah, the grandpa was outstanding. Oh man, it was just such a well done film. I didn't know what to expect. It had the right balance of gore and horror. Okay, but then the non-vampire scenes really felt like one of those movies, Pretty in Pink, or it really kind of had that feel to it, didn't it?
It had that romance in the comedy too, right, to balance it all out. So good.
Exactly. So I thought it was just an excellent film. So yeah, definitely on my list as well.
Nice. What you got next then, Rex?
All right. So let's do another one, and then we'll save the outliers towards the end. So for me, obviously, From Dusk Till Dawn. Okay. That was, again, that's why I love the genre. You can insert it into anything. It is classic Quentin Tarantino. It is Kill Bill meets vampires. Okay. And I thought the casting, George Clooney was excellent. I never liked Tarantino as an actor, but I thought he was pretty good in this one. And it's just one of those movies, it really is Kill Bill. There's a lot of, gunplay. There's a lot of, action and but they're vampires. Okay. And it's just the last scene as the sun's rising and they're driving away. It's just, it was really, didn't know what to expect from it, but it had a blockbuster enough cast. And I'm like, yeah, I'll watch it. Walk away from it. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, George Clooney is amazing. I love him in that role. I think it's one of Quentin's best performances as an actor. I agree with you. Sometimes it's like, oh my goodness, Quentin's got to show up just to be Quentin.
Got to be in the camera. Yeah.
Sometimes I want that, right? But what was crazy to me about this movie is that, because it's written by Quentin Tarantino, directed by Robert Rodriguez, but there's a lot of there's always been all these rumors saying that Quentin kind of directed the first half and Robert kind of did the second half, right? And they kind of merged it together. I don't know how true that is, right? However, that whole first half is like a dark crime movie, right? Like they kidnap these people. They killed, Quentin Tarantino's nutso. They're brothers, right? They're these two brothers. They're on the run. Yeah. They have these hostages. There's one of them in particular is very sadistic. And then the other one's kind of charming. It's George Clooney. They wind up holing out at this, Mexican gentleman's club or something. And it's filled with vampires, filled with vampires. Salma Hayek, that scene, everybody remembers that scene. And then the movie just goes balls to the wall crazy. Tom Savini pulling out his crotch gun, all that kind of stuff. It's a really, really fun movie, man. It's so dark and serious at first, and then it's like such a tone shift. It's almost like whiplash watching it.
Agreed. Yeah. So that definitely made my list of one of my favorite vampire movies.
For me, another one on my list is another one from 1987. Another one I watched when I was younger that I absolutely love. We've covered this on PCP Movie Night for Horror Fest as well already. Near Dark, the Catherine Bigelow movie starring Bill Paxton, Lance Hendrickson. Oh my goodness, I love this movie. It is a vampire film that's they never say the word vampire. They never do anything to necessarily establish rules. They don't build up lore or anything like that. It's just about this family of vampires that are on the run. So it's got this neo-Western type vibe to it. And it's got an amazing score by Tangerine Dream. I love the score in this movie. It is centered around a romance. And I feel like that romance, as quick as it happens, is kind of realistic. I love the dialogue. I love the tone, the atmosphere in this movie. There is something about it that is sultry yet unnerving and unsettling at the same time. And the vampire family, like Jesse, played by Lance Hendrickson, is amazing. There's so many little subtle things in the script that give you ideas about their backstory. But Severin, the character played by Bill Paxton, takes the cake for me. I love Near Dark. You ever seen that one, Rex?
I have, and it almost made my list, but yeah, I really enjoyed that one as well. Officially unofficial geeks in the house. What's going on, buddy? Thanks for joining us, man. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many. It was like, what was that other topic? You brought up I something about sci-fi films, and just it's just an endless amount that you can put the list on. We could be here for 3 hours, with the number of vampire movies. So that shows you that the genre is so big. So yep, there you go. Officially, we just covered Bram Stoker's Dracula, Lost Boys, Near Dark, anything with Christopher Lee playing Dracula.
I am Dracula. I love Christopher Lee, man. I love Christopher Lee so much. What else you got, Rex?
All right. So let's throw this out here. Blade 1 and 2. I think 2's better than 1, but it's something we've talked about endlessly. The movie Blade. It was probably your first kind of comic book related movie that people didn't realize, the general audience didn't realize came from a comic book, and I think it was a game changer for what we see in the MCU today, that you don't need a Superman, you don't need a Batman, you don't need a high profile superhero in order to make a movie and the general audience will come. It can be somebody that people didn't even know. The Blade characters from a comic book, and people came out because it was they were good movies that could stand alone. 3 got goofy, obviously, but 1 and 2, I still think, so to me, it's a classic, and it was the right mix. Again, it was the right mix. All of a sudden you have martial arts and stuff, moving in, and your protagonist is a vampire, but not really, the Daywalker. Yeah. So I thought it was a well done how they did both films.
I agree. And in PCP world, there is no Blade 3. We refuse to acknowledge it here. That's how we do. That's how we roll. But I'm such a fan of Blade and Blade 2. It was the next ones on my list. Blending action, superhero, if you want to do that, vampires, horror. It's good. Great performances. Wesley Snipes is amazing. Stephen Dorff is amazing as Deacon Frost to me.
Yes.
Udo Kier as the head of the Vampire Council. Like, everybody in this movie is so good, and they treat the movie so seriously. And that's what I love about it. Like, they have fun with it. There are jokey, fun moments, but like, it treats it so serious. It's so dark. It feels like the idea that there's this other world right beneath the surface that is always existed, that nobody sees, right? I absolutely love it. I think it's amazing. I love Blade 2 just as much, if not more. I think Guillermo del Toro did a phenomenal job with 2. Blade is great. Blade is absolutely great.
Chris Christopherson, it was a good cast. Chamorro. Now this is how I know you guys know each other. I think you're confused, Rex. There was never a third Blade movie ever.
You know it. Never was. All right, next one I'm going to put on my list is one that I actually just watched for the first time last year, and I've since watched it like 4 times because I really find the movie haunting. I find the movie beautiful. I find the movie intensely scary. The Hunger, the Tony Scott movie that has Susan Sarandon, David Bowie. I love this movie. So it's about this vampire and these 2 vampires, right? Well, this one vampire, she turns, David Bowie's like her lover, right? But there's something about the people that she turns where they start, I don't know, like eventually they just start aging really fast. So he rapidly starts aging, and he won't die because he's a vampire. So when he gets like so old and shriveled, she just puts him in a casket and then puts him with all of her other former lovers, and then goes out and basically tries to replace him. And then her own guilt over that, she tries to replace him with Susan Sarandon. The movie is incredibly sensual. The movie is incredibly stylized. It's Tony Scott, and it starts off and it feels like it's some kind of like post-wave music video, right? And then David Bowie's there. It's filled with beautiful people doing not so beautiful things to each other. But the scariest thing, and I think I saw this on In Search of Darkness, the I want to say it was, oh man, now the name's escaping me. The guy, Mancini, right? Don Mancini, the guy that did Chucky, created Chucky. He had said that there's something so scary about how disposable you can be when you're no longer needed in a relationship. And so it goes deep into that kind of stuff. I freaking love The Hunger. Have you ever seen that one, Rex?
I have not. But I probably will now. That sounds pretty cool.
It's really good.
So I've not seen that movie. Oh, look, Raul officially, actually, you know what? They've segued into it. So this is my oddball one. Officially brought it up. Once Bitten by Jim Carrey, with Jim Carrey.
Nice.
That was an oddball choice. I didn't think I'd like it, but my then ex-wife happened to be watching it. So I sat down and watched it with her and really enjoyed it. It was just kind of a fun movie, kind of as John likes to put it, a popcorn movie sort of thing. It wasn't too deep, the same, high school kid who's, pretty much trying to get laid. That's it. And then vampires, you can just introduce vampires into almost any kind of environment. And, obviously it was, I think, Jim Carrey's first big movie that kind of put him on the map. It was just, who was the woman? I forget her name now. Oh, she was in a lot of movies with Burt Reynolds.
Yes. What was her name?
I can't remember now all of a sudden. But yeah, it was just a fun movie. So, not in the least bit scary, kind of goofy slapstick sort of movie, which is right up Jim Carrey's alley.
Yeah. Are you talking about Lauren Hutton?
Lauren Hutton, that's it.
Yeah.
Yes. So so that was one of my made my list. A little bit of an oddball, not quite what people are thinking when they're thinking of the genre, but it was just one of those goofy kind of movies.
I'll tell you what, there's a good solid trilogy, I think, of 80s vampire comedies, because there's Once Bitten, there's Vampire's Kiss with Nicolas Cage, and then there's My Best Friend's a Vampire with the dude that's in, I don't remember his name, but he's in Dead Poet Society, and he was in House. He was House's buddy in House or whatever. Those are three really fun, solid movies. Teen comedies in the 80s were explosive, right? Mix it with the vampire film, the horror waves. You take the teen sex comedy, right? You take the vampire horror film, you put it together, you got success, right? That's the way it goes.
So the Hondalorian, that Dracula movie with Frank Langella, I forgot about that one. That was actually good because Frank Langella was such a tremendous actor. I remember when he played Skeletor in the He-Man movie.
Yes.
Oh my God! Everybody was a horrible actor, and then you came Frank, Langella with his classical training, stage training.
It's like Raul Julia in Street Fighter. It's like Raul Julia in Street Fighter. You're like, how is this dude giving it his all in this movie?
It was just like, he would be up there and Skeletor with his staff, and he'd give this oratory, and then you'd have Dolph Lundgren saying something like, "Let's get him." It was just like, it was so unfair. It's like, dude, really?
It's like a lot of them canon films, man, because they always brought in that one solid, like Shakespearean stage actor to come in and do things, and then fill the rest of it's all Van Damme or Lundgren or whatnot, right? I love the Motu movie, by the way, but yeah, I love those movies too. Once Bitten's from 1985. The next one I want to list is from 1985. It's one of my favorite vampire movies. We actually covered it. It's funny how many movies we've already covered on Horror Fest, but Fright Night, the original Fright Night, and just like Manny says, I do really, really like the remake. I thought the remake was fantastic too. But the original Fright Night, I love. So it's about a kid who's obsessed with watching monster movies late at night, and he's coming of age, and he's got a girlfriend, he's got a friend who's kind of getting on his nerve. I related very much to this movie as I grew up, especially, but I grew up loving horror movies. I'd watch those late shows where they would play the old movies and stuff like that. I would rent the VHS cassettes from my library of all the Universal stuff, all the Hammer stuff, all that classic stuff. That's what I made that was everything that I filled in my head when I was a kid, was just baseball and horror films and comic books, basically, right? But I love Fright Night. Chris Sarandon as the main vampire, he's freaking phenomenal. The guy who plays Brewster, I can never remember his name, but he was also the dude in Herman's Head and Mannequin 2, I believe. But great performances, such a great movie, amazing special effects, and a killer banging soundtrack.
62 Lefty, what's going on, buddy? Yeah, that was a good movie as well. I agree. Visual effects were something else. But all right, so let me see here. And then somebody else brought up right after, I think was Underworld. Obviously, I talked about this on last week on our Werewolf Day. Yeah, Raul. See, this is a great movie. It works for both lists. You know, again, the reason I liked Underworld was that it explored the relationship between. So it was different than other films in the sense that it explored the relationship between vampires and lycans. Okay, whereas usually you've seen. I don't want to say you've never had vampire versus werewolves, but it explored the relationship and how lycans seem to be that second class tier citizen, if you will, in that universe, and vampires were the elite. So it really said something to me, and obviously the action scenes were phenomenal. So I really enjoyed that. You know, the first couple were good, and then it got kind of a little bit ridiculous as time went on with the sun and all that. It was just like, ugh. Okay, now you know you've got so much material you could do, you know, and you didn't really take advantage of it. So for me, the first two, the rest, kind of like you guys with Blade 3, you know, doesn't exist.
So, right? Okay, we can make that PCP canon if you want to around here. There's only 2 Underworld movies. The next one I got on my list is something that I don't think a lot of people think of it as a vampire film, but it is. But we already talked about Blade 2 by Guillermo del Toro. There's a movie he did called Chronos, a Spanish film. Have you ever seen that one?
I have not.
Okay. Chronos has got Ron Perlman in it, and it's a fantastic movie. It's about this young girl, and her grandfather, I think, owns this like antique shop, and he gets this thing that winds up being something called the Chronos device. And it's this like scarab beetle looking thing that's got gears and stuff inside of it. And it somehow latches itself onto him, and it takes some of his blood. Right. But it takes his blood and then does something. The machine does something to the blood and spits it back in. He starts becoming younger. Right. It turns him into a vampire. Right. And then there's this old wealthy guy who lives in this sterile environment. Ron Perlman's like his number one guy, is his right hand guy. And he's sent to go and find this device because this dude's like old and dying and he wants to live forever. And so then it involves this conflict. And like a lot of Del Toro films, it's all from the perspective of, like in Pan's Labyrinth, from a young girl. And it is such a beautifully shot movie. It is an amazing film. Mostly all in Spanish. I think there's a mix of English here and there. It is absolutely a fantastic, phenomenal movie. And there's a really cool Criterion Blu-ray out there I got to get because it's got a cover by Mike Mignola. It's such a great movie. Have you ever seen that one, Rex?
No, I have not. No, but again, I got to put it on my list as well.
I recommend it.
It seems like officially, and I seem to have the same taste because he's just named another one on my list. Of course, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
She, by the way, I think. Pretty sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. Unofficially is a she. Oh, yeah. You see, the picture is too small. I can't see it from where I'm at.
Well, you're an old man with them bad old man eyes. We understand, right?
Thank you, Robbie. I appreciate that. You should really get into counseling work.
Yes, I should.
Yeah, I mean, Buffy to me was, again, one of those fun movies. You know, a little bit of action, a little bit of whatever. It was goofy. It was a good popcorn movie. And obviously, it then went on to spawn the TV series. Okay, you know, and I actually enjoyed the TV series as well. So for me, it was it kind of iconic, coming out of the same kind of period as you know, those kind of, you know, we've talked about them, that kind of John Hughes type of feel, or, you know, kind of feel to it. So obviously, it had to make my list.
I don't know, man. I can't say that I'm necessarily a fan of the movie, but I am a huge fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the TV show, which is probably my favorite show ever. There would be no Buffy the Vampire Slayer show without that movie.
True.
And there are elements of it, like, it's been a long time since I revisited it, but my love for the show does enhance my love for the movie. So I do appreciate the movie, and I think it's fun. And Paul Rubens in that movie, where he gets ooh, ee, ah, ooh, ah. That's so funny. And my favorite line is the whole "Pike's not a name, Pike's a fish." I thought that was great. So
yeah,
all right.
You know, again, the TV series became popular in and of itself, and kind of took a different direction. You know, so I don't see them as the same thing. I like them both, but I don't see them necessarily the same as necessarily the same thing.
Yeah, I
You know?
remember Joss Whedon always saying that like he did not like he just wrote the film. He didn't direct it, right? And apparently
Right.
like Donald Sutherland didn't get along with what Joss Whedon and wouldn't do the lines that were there. And Chronos is on HBO Max, by the way, Rex, apparently from 62 Lefty Blues. That's awesome to know.
Cool. That's one of the infinite number of streaming services I pay for.
But so when he got to do the show, he was able to kind of like do more of what he intended with
Right.
the project, right? And then even the finale of season 1 of Buffy, where she's wearing the dress, she's going to the formal dance, she's wearing the leather jacket. It's kind of like his version of the movie. But the cool thing is the movie always remained canon in some kind of slight way to the show, which I really, really liked. All right. Do you got any more, Rex?
I have one last one.
Okay.
How about you?
I got 3 more.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say there's a movie. It's very unconventionally a vampire film, but it's called Martin. It's not the Martin Lawrence TV show, but it's called Martin. It's from the 70s, I believe. It's George A. Romero. And it's about this kid who is obsessed with the idea that he's a vampire. So he goes out and he like murders people. He like bathes in their blood. And there's this ambiguity about whether he is or isn't a vampire. And I haven't seen it in a long time, but it is such an interesting take. And I love George A. Romero, and he always has some kind of commentary on society in his films.
Right.
A lot of horror films do, but Romero in particular, and what he's trying to say about like young, impressionable men and desire and the confusion of finding your sexual self at adolescence and things like that. It's a really solid movie. I would recommend. So heck yeah.
Why don't you do 2? Because you have 3 left.
All right. The other one I want to put out there is Let the Right One In, which is, I can't remember, is it a Swedish film or a Norwegian film? They remade it here called Let Me In. But the original film from either Sweden or somewhere over up in that area is such a haunting, beautiful film. It's about these 2 young kids. One of them's a vampire. The other one is a human who's getting bullied and things like that. And there's a scene involving some cats that's like absolutely crazy. So the American remake is pretty good, Let Me In, but the original, Let the Right One In, that movie is haunting, deep, melancholy, and touching at the same time.
All right. So my last one, and I have to say, it might change from time to time, but I would definitely call it one of my favorites, if not, favorite. Maybe on your list for your last one. I am shocked that unless I missed it, nobody brought it up in the chat, has to be Interview with a Vampire. That was unique. As much as I liked Bram Stoker's Dracula, that was, you had a roadmap from the novel, right? And they followed it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think it needed to be done. I don't think anybody had ever followed the novel quite that closely. And it was obviously, again, beautifully shot. But Interview with a Vampire had a completely different take that I don't think anybody had ever done before in a vampire movie. Not to say I've seen every single vampire movie, but it definitely had a unique outlook on it. Kind of like a biography. Okay, 62. I might have missed it. It's possible, as we've already determined. My eyesight's not that good, but I think that it had kind of like a biography. You could have inserted a historical figure and a reporter, and that kind of would have been the same movie, except in this case, that person, that historical figure, is a vampire. And seeing and telling the story. Okay, thanks, Eddie Von B. It used that kind of format to tell the story, and I thought that was fascinating. I really thought that was interesting. A very interesting way of doing it.
I haven't seen Interview with the Vampire in so long. It's probably something that deserves a revisit. I do like it. I think it's interesting, and I think it's really ahead of its time with it's based on the Anne Rice stuff, but they're basically talking about a story of a daughter with 2 dads, right?
Yes.
And they're playing with that, and they're actually doing some stuff. And Tom Cruise is pretty good in it. Brad Pitt's really good in it too. And Kirsten Dunst is actually really good as the.
I think she actually kind of stole the show.
The idea of like being turned when you're a kid, knowing that you'll never be able to grow old, never, Homer from Near Dark kind of has that same kind of thing going on. And that's an interesting approach to the vampire story. And you'll see a little bit of that maybe in Let the Right One In. So an Interview with the Vampire's got to be mentioned, obviously, right? So there you go.
So 62 Lefty said he read an interview in 1980. Anne Rice claimed to get the story from a guy in Georgia who claimed to be a vampire. Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Today on Unsolved Mysteries. The last one I got is the original sequel to the original Dracula with Bela Lugosi. It's Dracula's Daughter. Dracula's Daughter gets so overlooked as far as some of the best vampire movies. And there's a lot of great vampire movies, especially throughout the 60s into the 70s that focus in on like female leads and female vampires, women.
Right.
And like, this was so freaking good. It's way ahead of its time with some of the subject matters and some of the thematic material that it's dealing with. The actress that plays Dracula's daughter is amazing. It takes place right after the conclusion of Dracula. And then Dracula's daughter shows up to collect his corpse, right? Or to make sure that he's dead because maybe they don't have the best relationship. But she is a vampire. And so she has a henchman who goes out and finds young women to bring to her studio for her to take. I think she's an artist, right? So she's wants to draw them or take pictures of them or something. And there's some really crazy, way far out there scenes for the time, right? There's blatant like lesbian sexuality stuff kind of going on that doesn't really get brought back into the vampire film for a while. It's such a great movie. And it's not just because there's that stuff. Like I said, it's very subtle. It's not a dirty movie in any kind of way. It's not what I'm trying to say, but it's incredibly ahead of its time and an amazing film, Dracula's Daughter. Y'all, if you've never seen it and you like Dracula and you like that stuff, you need to watch it. It's such a good movie.
So Eddie Von B brings up Salem's Lot, the miniseries. Forgot about that. I forgot about that. Stephen King. I mean, what can you say?
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of the movie. I guess the miniseries or whatever. Did it air over 2 nights or was it just 1 night? I don't remember. But
I feel like it was 3, but I might be wrong.
Okay. Because I only ever saw it on VHS or whatever. And we mentioned it earlier. We were talking about Nosferatu, about how they use that makeup for their vampire. I love the Salem's Lot book. I just have always been disappointed in the adaptations because I love that book so much. But we revisited it last year, I think, for Horror Fest. And I mean, I there are things that are very creepy in it, right? Like, and it does capture that Stephen King small town type vibe. But that kid at the window floating, that's probably the scariest thing in that whole movie, man.
Well, I guess I was sort of disappointed they didn't actually make a movie. They turned it into a miniseries. But again, I enjoyed it. I thought that anything Stephen King, I'm a fan of. So, but again, I got to tell you, that's why I was always more drawn to vampire films and werewolf films. There's so much that you can do with it, because you can insert vampires in almost any situation that you think of.
Exactly, except for maybe the surface of the sun.
Except for the surface of the sun. Yeah, I would agree with that. Although, I don't know. We're getting kind of close to it in Blade, right?
I know, right? Daywalker, why not? Space floater, sun toucher, who knows, man? Yeah, the floating kids at the window are very, very creepy.
Yeah, that was pretty creepy.
Let me in, all that stuff. All right, well, yeah, you said it. You were like, man, we're going to go almost for an hour, I'm sure, on this one.
I knew we were going to be over, dude. There was no way we weren't going to be over on this one.
All right, be sure to let us know your favorite Shadow of the Vampire. I remember that one. Also, Robert Eggers is apparently doing the Nosferatu remake, the guy that did The Witch and The Lighthouse and The Northman. So that'll be interesting to check out. Rex, thank you. What?
Eddie Von B, I got to comment on that. I do remember the Space Vampire episode. I loved Buck Rogers, okay? I would watch that every week religiously, man. So, but I'm sorry. Yes. Have a great weekend, everybody. Don't forget on the Experience channel on YouTube tonight from 7 to 8, we've got original art with Nick. And then Robbie and I will be back on the Experience channel on Monday night, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern.
Yes, we always have a fun time there. And then here on Pop Culture Philosophers, if you want more horror content, join us on Dylan's horror show tomorrow first for The Witch. It's my first time watching it. I am excited to talk about it. And then Monday, after mine and Rex's show on the EXP, here on PCP for PCP Movie Night, we're talking about The Serpent and the Rainbow, a Wes Craven classic, I believe, from like 87, 88, something like that. I love that film. It held up tremendously on the rewatch for me. And yes, Life Force was space vampires, and it's pretty cool. And we actually covered that at the beginning of Horror Fest on Dylan's Horror Show. Anyway, we're dipping out. Thank you all for being here. Stay vampire spooky.